Well, this was a wedding gift from Marianne to the coach. It holds 43 years of memories of an NFL career that was remarkable. In fact, this football was given to the coach by the players. This is the ball that they used when the coach won number 325, becoming the winningest coach this game has ever known. Tonight, Coach and Marianne Shula welcome you into their home to celebrate 26 wonderful years.
Then on February 18th, owner Joe Robbie named Don Shula his new head coach.
He's the winningest coach in NFL history. Now, this South Florida legend is leaving the field. Tonight, join former players, friends, and family as we salute Don Shula's career with the coach himself. A tribute to a legend, Don Shula. Now, live at the Shula home, here's Channel 10 Sports Director Jimmy Cefalo.
And good evening, everyone, from the home of Don and Marianne Shula. This evening, over the next 60 minutes, we will take a look back at the career of the winningest coach the National Football League has ever known. Let me say this at the beginning of this program. I'm not sure who the next coach of the Miami Dolphins is going to be. At this stage, for the next 60 minutes, I really don't care. This next 60 minutes will be a celebration of 26 years of wonderful football and wonderful memories for all of us here in South Florida who lived and died with the Miami Dolphins. The coach announced his retirement early today, as you know. He'll be here with us in the next 20 minutes or so. Until that time, we will bring you back through the years at a wonderful look through that remarkable career. But right now, in case you've missed it somehow this afternoon, Frank Ford has a look back at the day Don Shula decided to retire.
Don Shula entered his final news conference as Dolphins head coach to applause. He's earned it. He's resigning with 1 year left on his contract. Shula said in meetings this week with owner Wayne Huizenga, it became obvious that with only 1 year left on his deal, it would be hard to hire quality assistant coaches should he decide to make changes in his staff.
In talking to Wayne about this, he said, well, if that's the problem, he said, why don't we extend your contract? And when he mentioned this, it took me back some because that was the furthest thing from my mind. And at that time, I just wasn't prepared to make any further commitment. That's the last thing that I wanted to do, is to make a further commitment, being at this stage of my life.
Certainly, as pro football's winningest coach, Shula has much to be proud of. And he talked of missing the game that his life has revolved around for most of the past 43 years.
I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that it's going to be gut-wrenching when that ball is kicked off in September, because this is going to be the first time in 43 years that I haven't been on the sideline in the National Football League. I can tell you that I'm at peace with myself, and I'm looking forward to spending time with my lovely wife, Marianne, and getting to know my kids and my grandkids.
Shula will remain with the team as part owner and vice chairman of Wayne Huizenga's board of directors.
But it isn't over yet. For Don, we all look forward to sharing your induction into the Football Hall of Fame. So, Coach, thanks for all that you have given us, and thank you in advance for all that I know you will give us in the future. We love you, Don.
Let me try to set the scene just a little bit for you about what was going on today there at Dolphins training camp. There were hundreds of members of the media there to witness the retirement of Coach Shula. Maybe a dozen or so of his former players, those not involved in the media, many members of the 17-0 team. In fact, the 17-0 team hung a little sign in the back of the room just saying, "Thanks, Coach." Outside, there were fans who were picketing, saying, "Coach, we thank you for all that you've done." Someone, after the press conference, asked Wayne Huizenga whether or not he was just putting up a front, whether or not he actually asked the coach to leave. And Wayne Huizenga said, "Look, if Don Shula wakes up tomorrow morning and says, 'I've changed my mind,' he can coach as long as he wants here for the Miami Dolphins." We're going to come back in just a moment as we continue our look at Don Shula's career.
When Tribute to a Legend returns, we'll look at Shula's early years as he makes the transition from pupil to professor.
Welcome back to our tribute to Don Shula. You know, Don Shula spent 43 years in the NFL, the first 7 as a player, He joked about that today. He was a defensive back for the Cleveland Browns. I always said to him, Coach, you might have been the only defensive back that I could beat on a regular basis. I'll never have that opportunity. He then spent some time as an assistant coach before, of course, becoming the head coach at the advice of Gino Marchetti, a former teammate of his with the Baltimore Colts. It's been a remarkable run for him. Right now, standing back at our Channel 10 studios, Frank Fort and Geneva Brew with a look back at the early days of Coach Shula's career. Frank?
Well, Jimmy, first of all, I think you're shortchanging yourself. You could beat more than Don Shula going deep. Don Shula's march toward the NFL began at tiny John Carroll University in Ohio. As Jimmy said, he was drafted as a defensive back by the then world champion Cleveland Browns and was later traded to the Baltimore Colts. Of course, the end of his playing career was just the beginning of his real career.
After 4 seasons in the defensive backfield, Don Shula was cut by the Colts. He played 1 season with the Washington Redskins before deciding to hang up his cleats.
We didn't have a very good football team. We ended up winning some games, and we weren't in the playoffs, and we ended up with better than a 500 record. But I knew that if I would have gone back to next year, it would have been really a struggle to make the football team again, and I had played 7 years.
It was just a stepping stone. I don't think he really cared whether he played pro football for any length of time. He was always looking ahead to where he could run a team rather than just playing on it.
He just scrawled out his name, Don Shula, D-O-N-S-H-U-L-A, and turned it back and said that this is the signature that's going to be famous.
After 1 year as an assistant coach at the University of Virginia, he hooked up with Blanton Collier at Kentucky. The Baltimore Colts had been NFL champions twice since Don Shula was traded to the Browns. But times had been lean. They were barely a 500 team when Carroll Rosenblum replaced Weeb Ewbank with his former defensive back. To Rosenblum, Don Shula was the coach of the future. At the age of 33, Don Shula had fulfilled his lifelong ambition. He was now the head coach of a National Football League franchise. His reputation as a winner was already well known.
I think the players were, very much in agreement with the choice. He had left there with a real great reputation, and there was still, a lot of players who had played with him and knew him, and he was, I think, a great football coach.
The future looked promising. With Johnny Unitas at the helm, the '64 Colts tore up the NFL, at one point winning 11 straight. In 1968, 6 years after becoming a head coach, Don Shula wins his first NFL championship. Riding on the arm of backup quarterback Earl Morrall, the Colts crush Shula's old nemesis, the Cleveland Browns. But there's one more game to play. Super Bowl III against the New York Jets. Miami's Orange Bowl is the setting, and the Dolphins aren't even involved. But the outcome will alter their future forever.
Things didn't go well in the Super Bowl game against the Jets. Namath just got the job done against our blitz, and they beat us every way that you could win a football game.
So you look back and it was probably the lowest point in my career.
It was also arguably the lowest point of Don Shula's coaching career, but fate was about to smile on him. His misfortune would turn out to be the biggest break of his professional life. Of course, Jimmy, we all know what happened after that. We'll get into more of that later. The Dolphins signed him on. They had to give up a #1 draft pick to do it, but it was probably the best #1 draft pick they ever spent.
And history was changed. Frank, I mentioned Gino Marchetti as we went into the piece. Coach Shula used to use Gino Marchetti throughout the years as someone we could look up to, and I never knew why until today. Guy Benjamin, you'll remember him, right. Frank. He was, of course, a quarterback from Stanford, came in the same year that I did. Guy needed an emergency appendectomy, and Coach Shula was told it would take about 2 weeks for Guy Benjamin to be able to get back. And, of course, his response, as it always was through the years, no matter the injury, no matter what happened, hey, Benjamin, Gino Marchetti would have been back in 2 days. So Marchetti, the man who really did say to Carroll Rosenblum, this guy Shula should be your next head coach, is the guy that Don Shula has a lot of respect for.
And Jimmy, the thing about that Super Bowl with the Colts, that probably was one of the things that made him so driven towards success. I think at the point, he was a little bit embarrassed by that, and he said that's not going to happen to me again. Of course, he did lose other Super Bowls, but not in upsets like that. Of course, he went on to great success, and I think that probably drove him to be as committed
as he was to winning.
I think you're right. Frank, we'll check back with you in just a couple of minutes. Frank Fort live in our studios there at Channel 10. We're getting back in just a minute. The Coach Shula is here. We'll talk to him in just a few moments and also continue our celebration, our look back at Don Shula's career.
There was only one word for it: perfect. The Dolphins of '72, when tribute to a legend, Don Shula, continues.
And welcome back to the home of Don and Marianne Shula. We'll get to them in just a couple of moments, get their thoughts on this very busy and historic day in so many ways. You know, I was not a member of the championship teams in the early 70s. I just wish I could have been. That 17-0 team was extraordinarily special. As I mentioned before, those men came today to say goodbye to Coach Shula out at training camp, put a sign up in the back of the room wishing him all the best. That's a special group of men that they'll tell you was molded by Don Shula. But when he first got here, the story goes that Don Shula said, we're going to practice 4 times a day. There was a strike, and so there was a shortage of preseason time. And they all said, 4 practices a day? Who is this Shula guy? They were soon to find out. Standing by with a look at the dynasty years back in our Channel studios, our own Janib Brew. Janib, I think you're a little bit too young for that as well. But 4 practices a day to today's athletes, it would never happen.
It wouldn't happen. They'd probably definitely complain about it. And I have to say, you just said I was a little bit too young, but I happen to be as old as Coach Shula has been with the Dolphins. So maybe that's why I'm such a big Dolphins fan, and it could be why this sort of, I think a little bit of something died in everybody today, I have to say. I know it's a happy day, but I have a look back at the perfect Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins entered the AFL in 1966 with mixed results. By '69, the franchise was suffering growing pains. Payne's owner, Joe Robbie, figured a new head coach would cure. That coach was supposed to be Bear Bryant from Alabama, but Bryant couldn't find a suitable replacement for himself, and Don Shula was available.
In 7 years as a head coach, and at the age of 40, he's been the NFL Coach of the Year 3 times already. He's been in the final playoffs. It's simply the greatest record for a coach of any age in the National Football League at that time, and we wanted it.
I think the biggest mistake a very smart man ever made was made by Carroll Rosenblum in 1970 when he let him get away from the Colts and go to Miami.
We lost a Super Bowl to the Jets, and what was once a great relationship between Carroll Rosenblum, the owner of the Colts, and myself turned into a pretty sour relationship.
My father, Carroll Rosenblum, was a winner and a competitor. Nobody likes to lose. He seemed to like it even less.
We felt that the fact he'd taken the Baltimore Colts to the Super Bowl was an adequate indication of the caliber of Coach Shula's coaching, and he had won something like 70 and lost 23 as head coach at Baltimore. So he was the top of his profession regardless of that personal relationship.
I got a call from Bill Broucher, who was then working for the Miami Herald and a John Carroll graduate. And he asked me if I would be interested in coming down to Miami as the head coach and part owner. And I said the way that my situation in Baltimore was, that I'd be interested in exploring it, but first I would have to receive permission from Carroll Rosenblum. Well, as it turned out, Carroll Rosenblum was out of the country, so I got permission from his son, Steve.
Don came in and said, Steve, another team has talked to me, and can I have permission to continue to talk? So you're sort of between a rock and a hard place.
And I told Joe Robbie that I had that permission.
So I talked to Shula, and within a matter of 3 weeks, he was head coach of the Miami Dolphins.
In 1971, Shula led the Dolphins to Super Bowl VI versus the Dallas Cowboys.
After we were so successful in defeating them in New Orleans, he went on, to be the only team that went undefeated and won a Super Bowl. And boy, that's a great mark of a man's success.
The last hurdle to the NFL's only unbeaten season, the Washington Redskins. But they weren't up to the challenge. Miami dominates 14-7. It's the highlight of Don Shula's professional career.
When we were able to win and go 17-0, that took me off the hook as far as Super Bowls. I now was 1-2 in Super Bowls, and 17-0 is something that nobody else had ever accomplished.
Perfection was his ambition, and for one glorious moment, his Miami Dolphins were perfect. It's likely that no one will ever match that accomplishment. Jimmy?
Janib, over the past few months, you've covered the Dolphins very closely, and you've talked to so many of the players. In my mind, they still discuss that 17-0 season. It's still the benchmark that they all look for. You get that impression even from this current group?
I think they feel that it would be difficult to ever accomplish. I mean, I think at one point this Dolphin team just wanted to get a win, really. And I think that will be very difficult to ever accomplish. I don't know why that team did it. I don't know how that team did it. I think it would be definitely difficult for these players. Sure, they would all want it, but they were all definitely very close to Shula, and they all felt that Shula was very loyal to them, very loyal to his coaches, and they constantly, I asked them about it, and they'd talk to me about it, and they just felt that he was a very loyal man, and they definitely supported him.
Janib, you're absolutely right. We'll check back with you a little bit later. I think loyalty is the one item that certainly defines Don Shula and his career. The coach is here, just stuck his head in to say hello. It's been a busy day for him, as you might imagine. He'll sit down in this chair in a few minutes, and we'll discuss his career. We'll look back at today, talk about his decision, and also about his future. That's when our special tribute continues from Don and Marianne Shula's home right after this.
He's on his way to the Hall of Fame, Victory 325, and more, as tribute to a legend rolls on.
A look into some of the remarkable memorabilia that lined this den in Coach Shula's home here on Indian Creek. When I came to the Dolphins, it was 1978. I retired sometime in '85. We went to two Super Bowls during that time, losing both. And when I think back of that, Coach Shula was simply in the middle of his career. He coached through 8 American presidencies, beginning with JFK, of course, going through Bill Clinton. A dozen of his players are now in the Hall of Fame. And I think, of course, that number will increase once Dan Marino decides to also call it quits. The later years of Don Shula's career have been not marked with Super Bowls, but they have been remarked by one remarkable quarterback, but some wonderful memories. Frank Ford, again, standing by in our studios at our Channel 10 offices. And Frank, I'll look back at the Dan Marino years and maybe a little bit more, too.
Certainly, not only his accomplishments measured on the field, Don Shula, but by what he's accomplished in the community and off the field. Certainly a man is measured not only by his career, but by his family, his friends, and the company he keeps. He's also measured not by what he says about others, but by what others say about him.
The thing I remember most about Don is what someone once said. I think it was an old Texan coach. And he said, Shula can take his'n and beat your'n.
Or your'n and beat his'n. And, you know, and it's pretty well proven that way, too.
When people are looking for answers, they look all over the place, but you can find them in, you know, just good old-fashioned values. And those good old-fashioned values epitomize what Don Shula, in my mind, has brought to coaching.
He's an extraordinary man, a man of morals, ethics, conscience, dignity, all of the great values of life.
He was a coach who embodied success and a man who refused to accept defeat. His mission was to find a way to win within the rules.
And just a little over 5 yards is needed by the Miami Dolphins. And, boy, if they miss it down here, Pittsburgh is going to have the ball.
I don't understand.
Inside the 10. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I don't understand. I don't think Paul Brown gets it, or Nick Skorich gets it either.
Well, this is really funny looking. All right, let's watch it. 4th down, a little over 5. Grazy's going to take the safety.
There it is, a safety. Sure. Shula's ahead of us all.
Yeah, he is. That's why he's there.
Shula's ahead of us all.
And Shula was ahead of them all for the better part of 4 decades. While his records may stand forever, his contributions to the game cannot be measured in terms of wins and losses.
The 1993 Miami Dolphins are about to make Don Shula the winningest head coach in NFL history. There's 10 seconds. The sideline is engulfed in a wave of emotion. 7 seconds. Don Shula, who for 32 seasons has embodied the winning edge and did it with class, dignity, and always within the rules, is just now 4 seconds away from win number 325. 2 seconds. 1. That's it. Don Shula is the winningest coach in the history of the National Football League.
Don Shula's coaching career, as Jimmy mentioned, spanned the administrations of 8 U.S. presidents. A dozen of his players inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and of course he will join them very shortly. Shula alone has more victories than 19 NFL franchises. He leaves the NFL his 2 sons, David and Michael, in coaching positions, and he leaves all of us more fond memories than we as football fans probably deserve. Jimmy, you kept hearing those words again and again, not only in that piece, but at the press conference today: class, dignity, integrity, perseverance, and they all, of course, describe Don Shula. And one other thing I want to mention, he may be leaving the game as a coach, but another thing that came out in his news conference today, he is going to remain as part of the NFL's competition committee, which is the panel that makes any and all rule changes in the NFL. So Don Shula will continue to impact how this game is played, even in his retirement as a football coach.
And Frank, through the years, he's always been very concerned about the safety of this football game, and I think he's done a lot. We used to call it the greasy rule. Do you remember what that was, Frank?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
The greasy rule, if you remember at the end of Bob's career, he was hurt, I believe, against Tampa Bay in a preseason football game. And Don Shula didn't like the way it happened. And so the greasy rule was the beginning of starting to keep big defensive ends away from a quarterback after he had released the football. Back in the old days, man, you threw the football and you took your hits. But Don Shula and the greasy rule changed all of that. All right, Frank.
They still take their hits, but they get fined for them now.
You got that right. It cost you about 12 grand. Frank, we'll check back with you in just a couple of minutes. All right, the coach, as I mentioned, is here. He'll sit down with us. We'll meet the man who retired today and the man we're paying tribute to when we return with our special Live from the Coach's Home.
Next, Ann Bishop shares her tour of South Florida Shula style. And we'll hear from the man himself live when tribute to a legend, Don Shula, returns.
You know, it is sometimes said that there are 3 people in South Florida whose credibility cannot be questioned. Alva Chapman, the former publisher of the Miami Herald, Ann Bishop's, and Don Shula's. All 3 are involved in our next piece. When you measure a man, you've got to measure him in several ways, certainly by his professional career, his one-loss record in this case, but also the stamp that he places on his community. Ann Bishop has a look at Coach Shula's stamp.
Don Shula has certainly left his mark on South Florida. From the busy Don Shula Expressway, the All-Star Cafe, the hotel, the steakhouse, the area is landmarked with his name. The public Coach Shula is well known and documented, and many know the private Don Shula as well. This devoted family man came from Baltimore in 1970 with his childhood sweetheart Dorothy and their 2 boys and 3 girls. Now there are 6 grandchildren and a close family relationship, held close with strong faith and love. When Dorothy died of cancer in February of 1991, Don created the Don Shula Foundation, dedicated to breast cancer research. It was far from Shula's only contribution to charity. United Way, Toys for Tots, Make-A-Wish, March of Dimes, Catholic Charities, and Best Buddies.
You know, Coach Shula, we can make a difference.
The list goes on, and much of his involvement is not even known to the community. These children of the Marion Center for the Developmentally Disabled speak on behalf of many whose lives he's touched.
Give me a D. Give me an O. Give me an N. What does it spell?
Don has projected a very positive image of South Florida that all of us in the business community and the civic community felt great about.
Former Knight Ridder chairman Alva Chapman has worked for years with Shula for the betterment of the community. How many times have you called upon him for help?
Oh, a number of times. Not a lot, but whenever I have called upon him, he did help, I recall.
In October of 1993, Coach Shula married Marianne Stevens, and together their love of family continued to translate into love of community. Do you have any projects in the back of your mind for him?
Well, I have a few if he'll listen, but I'm not sure that he's going to take advice from me.
South Florida has changed so much in the last 25, 26 years, and it's not just the facade, it's the vibrancy, the heart. And Don Shula has contributed so much to that. Whether you ever met him or had a chance to shake his hand, if you live here, Don Shula has enriched your life. But the good part is, even if we don't see him on the sidelines, he's still here. He's still with us, and he's still ours, and we're so glad to have him. I'm Ann Bishop, Channel 10 Eyewitness News.
And of course, the man himself, Coach Don Shula, joined us here in his own study. Coach, first of all, congratulations on a wonderful career, and thanks for taking this time to invite us into your home and to talk about the last 26 years.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jimmy. How long is this program? We got 26 years is a long time, and a lot of great memories. And that's the thing that I tried to bring out in my press conference today. It was a tough day for me, and it could have been a sad day, but I didn't want it to be a sad day. I wanted it to be a day filled with good memories, and I wanted people to be smiling and happy. And a lot of positive things have happened to me in my 26 years down here, and some negative. And this has been a tough year, and I realize and understand that. But I'd rather dwell on the good things that have happened, and appreciate the good fortune that I've had to coach this long in the National Football League, and to be able to do some of the things that I've been able to accomplish.
Let's talk about some of those good things. Today, at the press conference, I couldn't help but look around the room and see, a dozen former players, especially the 17-0 team. In the back of the room, I don't know if you saw it, they put up a sign just thanking you for everything. And I had a feeling, and knowing you as I do, that's the most important element for you is the relationship you've had with some of those men through the years.
Well, that's what it's all about, is relationships and hopefully affecting people's lives in a positive way. And those were such thrilling days, and the accomplishments were so great, and maybe we didn't appreciate them the way that we should have at that time. But nobody's ever done that before, and nobody's ever done it since, and so it must have been pretty tough.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, that 17-0 team is bonded together, and they've over the years have gotten close, and especially if a team goes 5-0 or 6-0 or 7-0, they start worrying about whether or not that record is ever going to be challenged or ever broken. So from that standpoint, that team has really gotten close together, and to have as many of them showed up today was very, very meaningful to me, because those were great memories.
Yeah, they certainly were. When we come back in just a moment, we'll continue our conversation with the coach, and we'll also be joined by a couple of his sons. We'll be right back.
A look through the Shula family album, live, when we return to Tribute to a Legend, Don Shula.
And welcome back to our special edition to look back at Don Shula's career. We're here at his home on Indian Creek in the middle of Miami Beach, and we're pleased to be joined by some members of the coach's family who, of course, have meant the most to him throughout his career. They've always been very strong and with him along the way. And Coach, we begin by the woman who, as we introduced this, said that she gave you this room as a wedding gift, Marianne.
Marianne, welcome to the show.
Thank
here.
you.
Let me ask this today. Today was a lot of fun for those of us who have known you both for a while. In this sense, you said that, Coach, you said this, tomorrow is the beginning of the rest of our lives. You've got a lot planned. Let me ask her, what do you plan for the immediate future?
Well, Jimmy, I don't know about his plans. I know I married him for better or worse, but I didn't know about lunch.
I think we can, at this stage, say this safely, you two are going to enjoy time for a while.
We are, and one of the things I'm looking forward to that most people take for granted is just being able to spend Christmas with our families, our children, our grandchildren, and Thanksgiving, and the sort of thing that we haven't been able to do.
I think that, Coach, those outside of the sport don't realize that there really aren't very many holidays in which you can enjoy with your family.
Right. You want to be working on Christmas, and you want to be working on New Year's, and hopefully up until the end of January, and that's the goal, and that's hard for people to understand, because Christmas is such a sacred time for family, and it's tough to realize that all of a sudden you might be working that day, and you hope that you're working that day. So that's what it's tough for, I think, people to understand and realize.
We know what a difficult decision this was for you, and knowing you always consult with those close to you. Do you mind if I ask Marianne your thoughts about the coach's retirement?
I'm happy about it. It's a decision that Don and I made together. Ultimately it was his decision, but he did consult with me, and we talked about it, and I'm happy. I think that we've got a lot of wonderful times ahead of us. I know we do, and we have a lot of plans for some fun things.
I know you do, and now it is time to bring in Coach's two sons, David and Michael, are joining us from Chicago and Cincinnati, respectively. David is in Cincinnati. We'll begin with him. And David, first of all, boy, you got the grandkids too.
We got the boys, huh?
David, I know you've had a chance to talk to your dad over the past couple of days. What are your initial thoughts about his retirement?
Well, it's something that he wanted to do, and it's come on his terms, and I know that he's at peace with the decision, and if this is what he wants, and I support it fully, and look forward to seeing him around a little bit more.
Coach, that's got to be a part of the scenario. I mean, I used to watch you asking for a Cincinnati score after your game was done. Part of the plans are going to go up to David and watch some football.
Oh, there's no question about that. And I want to get to know those grandsons. There's two of them there, and we got another one around somewhere. Where's Christopher? We got Matthew there, and we got Danny over there, and then we have Christopher. And you know, I've haven't gotten to spend the time that I'd like to spend with my grandkids. And Marianne has some grandkids, so between us we've got 8 children and 8 grandchildren. So that in itself is going to take a lot of time to get to know and spend the time that we need to spend with them.
Well, Coach, I have a feeling this next gentleman is going to provide even more grandchildren at some point in the future. Standing by is Michael Shula from Chicago. And Michael, I'm going to pose the same question to you. I know that Coach, of course, your dad has talked to you about this decision. What are your thoughts now that Don Shula has entered retirement?
Well, again, like Dave, you know, I'm happy because he's happy. And, you know, everybody knows my dad's had a great run, and what all he's meant to football, but more so on the family side, we're all very proud as children just to you know, have him as our father, and my mom when we were growing up, and now Marianne married to my dad. It's you know, everything's been very. We feel very lucky to be in the situation that we've been in, and you know, I know this has been a big decision, obviously, for my dad, and we're 100% behind you, Dad.
All right, Mike, how are you? How you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's cold up here, though.
You know what the nice thing about this is, Coach, now we won't have to get you two to visit through the magic of television. Michael, I'm going to ask you a difficult question if I can, put you on the spot. If you could be an assistant coach under one of the two Shulas, which one would you choose?
Jimmy, come on now.
Well, wait a second now. I was, about 8 years ago, I played for both of them for one game. Dad's staff was coaching the Senior Bowl, and I was a senior coming out of Alabama, and Dave was the offensive coordinator. He called all the plays in the game, and I was happy about that, and Dad gave me the starting nod for the game. But
of course, and we won too, right?
That's right, we won. We scored 41 or 43 points, and we beat Jim Harbaugh and Chris Miller. They were the quarterbacks on the other team, but it was, and I've had the chance to work with my dad as an assistant coach, and you know, I loved every minute of it, and I wish it could have been for longer, and I'm very happy up here, and I've never had a chance to work with Dave as a coach, but it'd be interesting. I know that, you know, as I know how competitive they both are, just from our growing up and our golf games and tennis matches and things like that.
David, let me bring you back into the picture if I can and ask you this question. Through the years, I know your dad's counsel has been vitally important to you. As you have grown as a head coach, and boy, I want to first say congratulations. You really had that program turned around this year. What has this counsel meant to you as you've grown as a head coach?
Oh, it's meant the world to me, Jim. There's so many things that happen in this job on a daily basis that are new and different, and it's been very nice to know that I can always pick up the phone and call somebody that's been through it before and has done it the right way.
David, now that you know the circumstances, your dad is retired, are you going to have him down there in Cincinnati helping you out maybe? You know, you've got mini camp coming up.
I've gotten a lot of questions about that today from our Cincinnati media, wanting to know if he's going to be more than the consultant that he's been, and hopefully he'll be there for me even more than he's been in the past, which was whenever I needed it.
All right, David and Michael and the little grand guys, if you can hang in there just a second, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll be back with Marianne and Don and the whole clan when we come back to this special right after this.
Some final thoughts for tonight only from Don Shula when Tribute to a Legend returns.
And welcome back to our special tribute to Don Shula on the day of his retirement from coaching. Coach, you know, we said 12 players in the Hall of Fame that you have, and there'll be many more. I know that. Of course, Danny makes it an automatic 13, and it's the perfect number for him. As you look back, though, there's got to be a handful of players who just make your eyes sparkle. Who are they?
Well, no question about that, but on the Hall of Fame, we've got to get a defensive player in that Hall of Fame from our 17-0 team, and you know, 15-2 the next year, that wasn't bad either, back-to-back Super Bowls, and none of those players have been recognized, and so many great players, but the fact that they played together as a team and they weren't individually recognized, I think it's hurt some of them as far as their Hall of Fame opportunities go, but I'm going to push as hard as I can to get some of those players recognized, and you know, that's got to happen. You can't win that many football games without some people being recognized.
Folks like Nick Bonacani and
certainly Dick Anderson, and
sure.
Manny Fernandez, and you know, people that contributed so much to us in those years. But you know, in answer to your question, you know, through the years, so many exciting players, and you really. You know, you can't pick out one. The quarterbacks that I've had the opportunity to work with, Johnny Unitas, and then coming down here, and Bob Greasy and Earl Morrill, and now Dan Marino. I mean, when you think back about a career coaching people like that, that's something that you'll always remember and be happy and thankful for.
And David and Michael, I know you're still out there. You also spent your childhood growing up with some of these great players. Any thoughts, any memories as your dad says goodbye to the sideline about some of the great players? Start with you, David. I mean, you charted plays for many years for your dad.
Right. You know, I think back to the early 70s and having the good fortune to watch Bob Greasy throw to Paul Warfield and Howard Twilley, and watch Larry Zonk, Jim Kick, or Mercury Morris run the ball behind Larry Little and Jim Langer, and watch Nick Bonacani, and then my idol, guy named Jake Scott, who I wore the number 13 in high school and college, and still have those jerseys and treasure them, and a lot of great memories, a lot of great, terrific people that I consider it an honor to say that I know and am friends with.
All right, guys, thanks so much for taking the time and paying tribute tonight, and I know you two will spend much more time in the future. You four will spend more time in the future, and I'm sure his lump in his throat when he says Jake Scott, my son wants to be like Jake. And to Michael, let me ask this question as well. Michael, you also charted plays and grew up in the organization. How about your favorite players through your dad's career?
Well, I think, again, like Dave, I grew up, you know, loving to watch Bob Greasy, and he was always one of my childhood heroes, and then having a chance to be on the sideline and chart plays for him and hang around him during practice. And I can remember when I was first starting out on a road trip, Larry Zonk asked me to change his turf shoes, change the cleats in his turf shoes, and I was trying to figure out how to do that. Meanwhile, little did I know they were molded in the shoe. But growing up, as I've gotten older now, and I'm a big fan of Danny's right now. He's fun to watch, and I know I'm not alone as far as the coaches going at National Football League, as far as him being a favorite to watch.
Yeah, you're right, Mike. All right, Mike, thanks so much for taking the time as well. And I know
Mike,
you too,
and Dave,
will
and
spend
family,
time.
and everybody. Thank you.
All right, we're going to come back. We'll wrap it up, get some final thoughts for the coach, and the special tribute to Don Shula.
The coach's career in a video essay is next, when tribute to a legend, Don Shula, returns.
And it is not easy to put into a small capsule the career of Don Shula. It spanned 43 years in the NFL, and it's not over yet in that sense. He will remain with the league in some capacity. But we've tried to do that, and we'll come back and say our goodbyes to the coach and Marianne in just a moment. But first, our tribute to Don Shula through the years. Really has been a magical ride, Coach. I guess
a lot of memories.
That's the only way to say it.
Yeah, it's so touching when you have the opportunity to sit here and reminisce like that and think about some of those things that happened. And people have done a great job putting that together, Jim.
Thanks, Coach. Marianne, it was funny watching the piece with you as well. You never saw him in those early days now, did you? You didn't know that's what he looked like.
No,
Yeah.
I like the wardrobe, especially the pants.
Yeah, he dressed up in a suit and tie once upon a time in his career. Coach, in the few minutes we have left, it's been so hard for a lot of us players to go through the last 24 hours too. You've meant a lot to us, and I know this isn't goodbye by any stretch of the imagination. You're simply going on to another end and another level of your life. Can you put this career of yours in perspective for the fans who cheered you on and for the players who respected you?
Well, it's just been such a great run. I mean, when you think about coming down here in 1970 and then having the opportunity to do the things that we did, the accomplishments and, the fan support that we had and, the players, the assistant coaches, the ownership, everything that helped make this possible. And to be a part of that, that's what it's all about. And then to have the opportunity to do things in the community that's meant so much to us. And those things, too, are very, very important to me. So those are the thoughts that I have. And, this is a tough day because I realize, what it means. But, the shock won't come until September. And the ball is kicked off, and for the first time in 43 years, I'm not going to be involved in that kickoff. But I'm sure I'm going to be nervous and pulling for the Dolphins. I'm going to be involved, continue to be involved in ownership and be a member of the board of directors and help Wayne in every way that I can to make this as good a football team as we can make it. So that's my thoughts, and those are my ambitions, and enjoy life with Marianne and our kids and our grandkids, and do things that we haven't been able to do because of the demands of the profession.
Paul Tagliabue, you said today that you also spoke to him,
Right.
and he's asked you to continue on with the competition committee. I know that's very important to you as well.
It is, because the game has meant so much to me, and Paul's doing a great job now as the commissioner, and when I started, Bert Bell was the commissioner, and he was the perfect guy for that time frame, and then Pete Rozelle was the perfect guy for the time that he was the commissioner, and now Paul Tagliabue. And the league is having some problems now and some difficulties, but they're going to pull out of this thing, because the history of this league is that they've always been able to do the things that are necessary to make the game as great as it is, and that's why I've really enjoyed my association and relationship with it, and why I want to continue as a member of the competition committee. George Young is the co-chairman of the competition committee, a very good close friend of mine, and his goals are the same as mine, to make the game as safe as we can make it, as exciting as we can make it, and just do whatever we can to try to be ahead of the trends.
So, in other words, Coach, you talk like a man who's got a plan for the future, and it's a very busy one. I just wanted to say our thanks first to you, Marianne, for allowing us into your home.
I'll miss your shows on Monday night with Don.
And I may be speaking out of turn, but I do, on behalf of all the players who've coached, want to say thank you for everything you've done. It has been a remarkable period of time for all of us to be a part of your life. That'll do it for this special edition, Coach. All the best in retirement.
Jimmy, thank you. Enjoyed our relationship and hope it continues in the future.
It will.
Thank you.
And good night, everybody. And Bishop.
Trust me, you're going to love it. And so is Marianne. I'm so glad you were with us.